Hello people of the internet, this is Kaiju Noir here to introduce this heavily belated video in a similar manner to how I introduced episode 24 of the Shuwatch podcast. Because a lot has happened between now and when Matt Dennion and I recorded this podcast, Matt and I felt that it was important to update some information that was mentioned on recording. The first thing to note is that his latest books, Atomic Rex, Wrath of the Polar Yeti, Kaiju Core, and Atomic Rex vs. Dorugon, have all been released across multiple publications. The second point is that 8 of Matt's monsters, including Atomic Rex, Chimera, Polar Yeti, and the Rocks, will be appearing in the Kaiju Assault card game at this year's G-Fest. Also, a huge thanks to our friend Frank Parr, who he commissioned at the last minute to make this amazing title card, as well as Enshohma for doing the colors. Now without further ado, let's start the show. Hello people of the internet, this is Kaiju Noir here with another episode of the Shuwatch podcast. My guest for today's episode is something that's actually I brought new to the table. Normally I've dealt with artists, and comic book writers, but now I actually have a giant monster novel writer in the form of Matt Dennion. Say hello to the internet, Matt.
Hey everybody out there, pleasure to be on the show. Can't wait to talk to all you guys.
And so, much like with a lot of my friends and the recent guests on the Shuwatch podcast, Matt is another individual that I had the great pleasure of meeting at G-Fest, specifically this year's G-Fest, where I believe it was like our friend Chris Martinez who introduced me to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. Chris had called me over. He said, "Oh, we're giving an award to Andres. You got to be here." I'm like, I don't think I've met Andres before, but okay, sure, I'll be there.
Who's this nobody? Why should I care?
Yeah, but Chris was, he's a cool guy. I figured, if Chris likes you, you must be a nice guy. And, we needed to talk some at G-Fest, and I really feel like we hit it off pretty good. So we've kind of been talking on Facebook off and on since then. It's been really cool. So I've been looking forward to the opportunity to come on your show.
I'm very happy to hear that. So to start things off, tell us a little bit about yourself and your line of work. For those of my audience who are probably not familiar with your work.
Sure. I primarily work, and I'll just cover this very quickly, as a teacher of students with autism. So that's my main line of work. And then otherwise, I'm also a novelist. I've published now 6 kaiju novels, and I'm working on a 7th. And I also do a lot of the writing for GFan Magazine and their Kaiju Tales section, as well as a lot of work for Black Coat Press, writing stories with public domain characters. So, really, and I've been doing that. I started writing in about 2007, officially, I guess, up until the present. So.
Cool. So you've been about a writer for roughly close to 10 years then.
Yes, and it's kind of been a fun journey to get there. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and people who were worked very hard to get into the genre, so to speak. And it was really never something I had thought that I would do, is to be a writer. In fact, I just started writing because as a teacher, we have a lot of take-home work, and I needed something to give me a break in between work, and I couldn't just watch TV or something because I'd lose kind of that momentum. So I thought, I'll start writing, and originally I got into it writing for a website of a character I know you're a fan of, in The Shadow.
Ah, yes.
Yes, the old pulp character. So I just wrote a few stories for Shadow Sanctum, and people seemed to kind of like what I was doing there. And I had come across the Black Coat Press publications, Tales of the Shadow Men, where, I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but for your audience, what they do is basically they take French pulp characters, because they publish out of France, and we'll do crossover stories with predominantly other public domain characters, although they do kind of bend the laws a little bit over there. So I've published stories with them featuring the Predator and Freddy Krueger and such. They contacted me basically from the Shadow website, and it was like, hey, we like your stuff. Would you like to give this a shot? So I thought, yeah, why not, right? What do I have to lose? And I'm only telling this story because it does lead into my kaiju writing specifically.
Right.
And that I'd written a story where it involved a French character who I used to bring back Daimajin from the Daimajin trilogy.
Nice.
And have him confront the amazing Colossal Man in kind of a story where the Colossal Man was very overwhelmed by this character. What happened was they didn't have an opening for Black Code for the story at the time, so I thought, I'll just submit this to GFan. So I submitted to GFan. JD really liked the story, and because I'm going to say that was about 2009, what had occurred is GFan was cut off from using Godzilla and any Toho characters in any of their comics or stories, so that the Kaiju Tales section had really kind of gone dead. So JD was really happy to get that. He asked if I'd like to do anything else. And I said, yeah, I got a few other ideas. So I did a few stories that didn't involve any Toho characters. Like I did a Gamera versus King Kong story for him. I did a story with the Ymir from 20 Million Miles to Earth. And a few other neat things. We got to do a story with the Japanese Spider-Man.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So I just had to use the Spidey on that, like a transliteral spelling.
The emissary from hell who fights for the rights of all spiders.
Yes. So that was cool. And that turned out to be the platform for my Kaiju author writing, in that I had read Jeremy Robinson's Project Nemesis, which I can only highly recommend, as well as the rest of the series to anybody out there. And at the end of it, he had asked for anybody who wanted to do any kind of artwork for him to show in his books, and I can't even draw stick figures, so I was like, I can't do that, but I thought, it would be neat. What if I did a story with Nemesis taking on G-Fantis, their mascot monster, so to speak, and I figured out what the heck, the worst you can do is not get back to me. But I sent him the pitch. He absolutely loved it. So I wrote the story, got to work with Jeremy, and he gave me a lot of pointers and said kind of like, you're pretty good at this. You should see about, keep going, because there really wasn't a lot of Kaiju novels out at the time. It just really kind of blossomed in the past few years, which has been good. So anyway, I thought I would take the... instead of just stopping at Nemesis, I'd reached out to a few other authors and said, hey, what do you think about your monster doing a guest spot in GFan? I'll write the story for him, and, you can edit it. Then we'll put it in the magazine. It's free advertising for you. It's nice for the magazine, kind of get these guest monsters. And I have to say, I was super pleased at the response that I got back. In fact, at the time, I had written to, I think it was 6 different authors, and 5 of them got back to me right away thinking that it was like a really good idea, which you might not necessarily get dealing with like superheroes and stuff, I feel. So anyway, I did a story with K.H. Kohler's Kaiju Raiju, and she too, another highly recommended book, by the way, she had said, you're pretty good at this too, and said, my company is looking for Kaiju authors. You think about submitting to them at Severed Press. And I never thought I would have a chance to write a novel, and really never put much thought into it, but I thought, you know what? When the door is open, you might as well give it a shot, right?
Right.
So that's when I wrote Chimera Scourge of the Gods, which you've read, right? And hopefully enjoyed.
Oh, yeah, most
very
definitely.
Nice. So did Chimera. Really didn't expect much of it. I thought it was a good story, but, it was kind of like, this can't be real. I'm not going to become a Kaiju author. Right. And lo and behold, Severed Press got back to me within a week and said that they loved it, and then followed up directly with, you got anything else? Which I was unprepared for. And thought, okay, well, I've always wanted to do a Rodan-type story, so I pitched Operation Rock.
Oh, okay.
Which they liked the idea for, picked that up. I churned that out in like 3 months, and they got back to me with, hey, you got anything else? So that's at that point I was like, okay, I've already done 2 big genres I wanted to do, and we can go into a little bit more when I get to the end of the story, but with mythology and cryptids. And my next thought was, I want to do a Godzilla story, but I can't do a Godzilla story. So I thought, what if we came up with the idea for Atomic Rex? I thought the name sounds good. It's kind of like Godzilla-ish. And pitched them Atomic Rex. Again, they liked that. So I wrote Atomic Rex, and again, they said, hey, what else do you have coming? So I was like, okay. And we're only at like, I've only been working for him 9 months at that point.
Right. So you're like pumping out these books at like at an astounding rate.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. I feel like I had come full circle back to like the pulp writing, where you read stories about like Lester Dent and Walter Gibson having to churn out like a novel every month and a half in order to kind of keep up. So I pitched them my idea for the Polar Yeti novel, which they liked, and we got Polar Yeti done, and that was doing well. And as I was writing that, I was starting to get feedback on all my other novels, which people seem to like, but Atomic Rex is quickly becoming like a monster bestseller.
Really?
And
I just want to bring up a quick little question. It seems like Atomic Rex, like just by looking at by your reputation, it looks like Atomic Rex seems to be like your flagship book, or like your biggest success. Why do you think Atomic Rex seems to have stood out from the rest?
I think it has to do with a couple of things. In particular, when I wrote Atomic Rex, the way that I approached it was I want to do a Godzilla story where Godzilla fights every other monster that I never got to see him fight. And I wanted to see him fight. So specifically, for very obvious reasons, I said to Silver Press, listen, on the cover, I want Atomic Rex and a giant turtle going at it, to kind of give like a Godzilla versus Gamera type feel. And then all of the other monsters that appeared in Atomic Rex are kind of your classic tropes from 50s and 60s movies. So there's like a giant amoeba that's like a blob type character. There's giant ants, which is a homage to them. There's the character Yokozuna, which was, to me, I'm also a big wrestling fan, so it's kind of a little bit of,
I was wondering where he came from.
Yeah, he's sort of like a mixture of Big Man Japan and the Amazing Colossal Man.
So
he's a little bit more of a satirical character, I suppose, than the other ones. And, I always feel like wrestling and giant monster movies, to some extent, go hand in hand because you get like a lot of wrestling moves, particular in the 60s Godzilla movies with like body slams and hip tosses. So that's why I utilized the Yokozuna name there. As well as the Tortoise character, the giant turtle is an obvious Gamera nod.
Damn it, I thought it was Kamibas.
Yeah. Well,
I was so close.
Close. You didn't get to the part where he takes off yet. That's the giveaway. And people really seem to latch onto the Ogre character, which is interesting, who I had kind of written as like a Dark Hulk. And
I was thinking of that, I was thinking, like, could he be going in a Hulk direction here?
Well, that's where I was going. I was always aggravated that in the 70s, Marvel never did Godzilla versus Hulk when they had...
Yeah. I know my friend Bill, a.k.a. Zazabar, he was, like, really disappointed with that because he's a big-time Hulk fan.
Right. It seems like an obvious...
It's like, if you're gonna have any superhero fight Godzilla, it should have been the Hulk.
Exactly. They did some neat things.
Who did they get? The what do they call them? Like, the Defenders? Like, with Hercules?
Champions.
Oh, the champions. Yeah, they got the champions. Yes. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, that's big time. And then he fought a rat when he got shrunk to the size of the, like a rat size. And so it was like, just give us the Hulk, for goodness sake. That's what we all want. But anyway, I feel like it was a couple things. They did a killer cover for Atomic Rex, when it came out. The name just seemed to hit people. It was funny, when I was at G-Fest, and I was sitting there with both my wife and C. Martin Croker was next to me, we all were watching. Everybody who walked by the table stopped, and they looked at all my books, and every, third person actually said, Atomic Rex. That they liked the concept or the name.
It's almost like something out of a movie. You're seeing, like, this ancient book, you're reading across it, you're like, my God.
So that was cool, but I think the big answer to your question is I did try to apply some of my teaching knowledge to all of my books. And one of the main things that as a teacher you try to convey is connection to prior knowledge. Because if people can connect something to something they're already familiar with, they're more interested in it, they're more comfortable with it. So with Chimera, I utilized mythological monsters as the sort of villains there, because I was hoping people had a connection to mythological beasts. And then with Rock, it was cryptids, giant cryptids, because cryptids are pretty popular now with, there's like 8 or 9 Finding Bigfoot shows on, which are all hilarious in their own way.
Right, and the best thing about those shows is that they will never end because they will never find Bigfoot, most likely.
Yeah, exactly.
It can go on forever.
Unless there's some dude out there with a student who's going to get shot. So, if he's listening, take it off, right? And then with Atomic Rex, like I said, it was all of kind of those homages to the 1950s and 60s monsters, which I feel like everybody loves. You really don't hear too many people say like, oh, I hate the Godzilla Showa era,
Yeah.
or I hate the Harryhausen films.
Unless you just have one of those ignorant individuals who just has a bias towards everything like made before like the 90s or whatever. Like people who have immediate bias towards anything that is old or anything that looks old.
Right. But I feel like most people like them. I know as a kid, those are the movies that I grew up that hooked me on the genre,
Oh, yeah, totally.
And other people seem to gravitate towards that too. Like I said, I get good feedback on all of my books, but it's by far like Atomic Rex. In fact, I've been told by a few people only Jeremy Robinson's Nemesis is what's outselling it. I don't really have those numbers in front of me.
So it's possible. So you are essentially like the number 2 guy behind Nemesis.
Yeah, that's
in
what
terms
of
like this like niche area of a fiction narrative writing.
Yes. Although I will say it's not like a close number 2. It's like Jeremy's a friend of mine, so I always talk him up too. But he's like Usain Bolt when it comes to writing kaiju novels. Like he's just far and away the best. Yeah. So being number 2 and being a distant number 2 is still a good thing, I feel like.
yeah, totally. And you think it's possible that a lot of people gravitated towards Atomic Rex because he is like the closest, he is like your analog to Godzilla, and that's what people want to see most?
Definitely, I think so.
Okay.
It's, he's Godzilla enough, but he also has his own personality where like you can see he's a homage to Godzilla, but he's not a ripoff of Godzilla. Right. Because there's plenty of books out there which do that. I'm not going to call anybody out on a carpet for it. There's plenty where it's, clearly this is Godzilla, and they, to use the Ultraman term, they just kind of like put the frill on his neck. And, went from there in their novels.
That does lead me to one of my questions I was saving earlier for later on. But where do you personally draw the line between homage and ripoff? It was something that I thought about, especially after Pacific Rim, because many people claim that Pacific Rim was a ripoff, when so many people like me would say, no, it's an homage. It does something that's different enough. So for you, where do you, like, that's why I want to ask you, how do you feel between the two sides, and where would you draw the line?
I would draw the line in that if you don't give the characters that you create something that's specifically unique to them. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you. I do not view Pacific Rim as a ripoff. I think it's more of a homage to things like...
Or not so much like ripoff, but rather like unoriginal. I think that's a better term.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. And again, it would be making things unique enough where... Mm-hmm. They're your own, and they're clearly identifiable as separate from the thing that they're a homage to. Mm-hmm. And some of that just comes, I feel like, having respect for what you're making homage for. Mm-hmm. So while Atomic Rex is my Godzilla homage, I did a lot to separate him. For instance, like Atomic Rex has the stance of a traditional T-Rex. Mm-hmm. So that he's not this erect, like, guy in a suit type of thing would be. Take away the dorsal fins, he's just kind of got like an alligator type back. He does have longer arms because I needed that for grappling purposes, like like.
Almost kind of similar to Graw from that one King Kong comic, King Kong, King of Skull Island.
Yes, in description more akin to the Gaw character from
Gaw,
Kong,
sorry, yeah.
Because like Kong, Skull Island, there's something like that. It's
King
not
of Skull Island?
That's it, yes. Okay. Kong, King of Skull Island. Yeah, in terms of visual appearance, more similar to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And let's see. Among all your books, which one, I probably know the answer to this one, but which of the books do you feel most proud of, looking back on all of them now?
For me, I would still say it's Chimera is the one I'm most proud of, actually. Mm-hmm. Because it's my first one, so that's something in and of itself. I guess it's like getting your first hit in Major League Baseball might be, what you're most proud of, so to speak. It also is the one that has the most of me in it, and that the lead character is, the fictionalized version of myself. and my friends and my family, he has the same occupation that I do, and then translates it over.
Yeah, you see, I didn't know that you were a teacher before, so it's like now looking back on the character of Luke Davis, it's like, okay, now I'm seeing a lot. The influences are becoming very clear now.
Yeah, it's funny. The editor, when he first read the story, he was like, "Man, you put that dude through hell in the first chapter." I was like, "Dude, that's Tuesday for me. That's every day. I'm not complaining about it. It's just what it is. I like my job, but that's what it is." But the neat thing was, and I won't bore your audience with this too much, but I had Luke utilize an ABA approach, the applied behavior analysis, to train Chimera, and that's absolutely what we use in my profession, and most people actually use it on a daily basis without realizing it. So it took more of like a real-world approach to training a monster than simply say like, and I'm not knocking this, but Pacific Rim with like where you sync up with the things I used in Rock, but I felt like that was good. Although I have to say, I am obviously very proud of Atomic Rex for the fact that so many people love it is nice too.
Do you have any other books, any other personal favorite books besides Chimera and Atomic Rex?
It was really fun to do the newest book, the Atomic Rex, Wrath of the Polar Yeti, because it was the first time I was able to bring two books together, and it was another one that was on the fly where I was actually working on the novel I'm currently working on now for Severed Press, and they said, put it on hold, we need an Atomic Rex sequel. So I was like, and I'd left a few clues in Yeti that it took place in the same universe just prior to Atomic Rex, so I kind of got the feeling that might occur. But it was really fun to do that because what I did with Atomic Rex, Wrath of the Polar Yeti is it's obviously a homage to King Kong versus Godzilla. But I got to use the Yeti to take on homages of a bunch of the Toho monsters that we never got to see Kong take on. So that was one of the fun things I got to do there, building up towards the final battle between the two. So that one was really fun to do. Actually, that only took me like 6 weeks to do, I think, because it was so much fun. I just couldn't stop writing it, and it just came out that way.
Nice. And a little while back, you talked about Severed Press creating like the artwork and you giving suggestions. I do want to know, what is some of the stories behind some of the covers for your books?
Well, typically the way that they work is they'll ask me what I'd like to see on a cover. So I send them a brief description. It's in my head. My hand just can't make it come out. And they'll usually do it, send it back to me, ask me for suggestions. I usually really like what they do, so it's more of just like a tweak here or there. Like I think in the Chimera book you're holding, they originally had white eyes on the Cerberus character, and I said, let's make them red. I think it'll like stick out a little bit more. Or when they did Atomic Rex, they originally had like a black eye for the Tortoise character, and I said to them, let's just make it yellow so it sticks out more as a face. Because otherwise, it was difficult to tell just at first glance what it was, but the yellow eye said it. But they're very good to work with, and they usually listen to what I suggest.
Is there a credit for anyone who makes these covers?
It's apparently a guy named Wayne. I know. I did ask them because I get a lot of feedback. I read some. They said, "Hey, people love the covers you guys do. Who does them?" They wrote back, "Oh, it's Wayne." I'm like, I guess he's like Madonna. He just has one name.
He is the artist formerly known as Wayne.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about Severed Press is too, they publish out of Tasmania, so they're
really, okay.
I guess like you, they're way far ahead of me in time. So it's funny. I'll email them on like Saturday my time, and they reply to me on what's Sunday their time, but the email comes back like it's from the future to me when it comes in. So it's kind of interesting.
That happens too. Like sometimes I send an email and it gets sent to the past.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And what are some of your, or what is probably your favorite cover of your books?
I would have to say, again, it's the newest one, the Atomic Rex, Wrath of the Polar Yeti, where it's they took the first Atomic Rex and they redid the background where it's the first one looks like it's kind of fallout, nuclear fallout in the background.
Yeah, a lot of green.
Yes. So they switched it to more of like a dark blue with snow falling, and they put they took out the turtle and put like a really vicious looking Yeti. Kind of looking up at him, and I thought, oh, that's so cool. That's what I wanted. And it also worked out well in that they kept the feel of the cover for the first Atomic Rex and kind of switched it out. So that made me pretty happy.
And is it some kind of like artistic like Photoshop sort of job they're doing with all these covers?
Yes, they're using a Photoshop program. I honestly don't know enough about the artwork to give you the details.
Right.
But they are doing that because like if I want to tweak, they can do it like instantaneously and send it back to me, which is nice.
Interesting. Yeah, because I've talked to most of the people, my friends that I've talked to, they're artists, and this is the first time I've seen someone approach things from through Photoshop, and it's a really interesting use, artistically, it's a very unique style compared to other people's projects. And it does, and it really does give your books, like at least the characters depicted on the covers of your books, like a more realistic style.
Yes,
well, I guess like technically
I'm very pleased.
Photorealistic. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, because I have self-published like 2 books that I've done. One was a kid book, one was a kaiju book, and I had local authors do the work. They did a very good job. It just doesn't have the same pop that it does with the computer Photoshop that they're doing with Severed Press. So
I see, cool. And does Severed Press do the Photoshop thing with their other books?
Some of them yes, and some of them no. Like if you were to go to their website and check it, I'd say about 80% of them they do utilize the Photoshop, so the covers do come out very well. There is a few though where I'm not sure. Maybe it's the artist has their own idea and does the author is an artist as well, I should say, and maybe does their own cover and sends it to them. So. But to me, they don't come out as well. I really think that the ones that they're doing come out much better.
I see. And let's see. What is something I want? Oh, yeah. So in terms of the artistic, since we're talking about the artistic directions of your character, have there been other opportunities where other artists have had the chance to interpret your own characters through their art styles?
Yes, I had a couple of very interesting ones coming out very soon, and that what you'll be seeing in hopefully the next issue of GFan, although it's always tough to tell when GFan's going to come out and what's in it, even talking to JD, is a story that will involve Atomic Rex taking on not only Gfantis, but Keith Foster's Kadoja, who I'm pretty sure you've had on before, right?
No, I haven't had Keith Foster on the show, actually, but I really do want to in the near future.
Oh, he's great, and Kadoja's a wonderful read, if you haven't read. So, but I believe it was Biggie who did the art for that story.
I think it was Denny.
Denny, sorry. Yeah, Denny, sorry.
Because Biggie, he does like the, what do you call it, the, not simplistic, minimalistic art. Yeah, with like bright poppy colors and basic shapes. Yeah, I saw when I met Denny at this year's G-Fest, he actually showed me like the pencil work for Kadoja, Atomic Rex, and Gfantis, and they depicted like Atomic Rex like on top of him like a raptor or something. I thought it was really cool because that was like my first time like seeing a full body image of Atomic Rex. And go ahead.
Oh, yeah, which is great. I'm sorry, what happened went away, and I apologize to Denny. I had asked Chris Martinez to do that, and he thought that Denny really knew how to do dinosaurs well, so he sent it to Denny, and I think Chris might have done the kind of inking on it at the end.
Yeah. I think, like, from what Chris told me, Denny is doing the pencils, and Chris is doing, like, all the digital inking and all the other stuff.
But he did a great job, and then... Chris Martinez, who does Night of the Fire Beast, I know he's been on the show. He and I are working on, Chris and I are working on a story of Atomic Rex versus Dorgon that's going to appear in GFan, and I just put that on Facebook, and Chris put it on Facebook. I think it was earlier this week. He did a great job. I'm a big fan of Chris's work, I can't wait to see how the final comic comes out. But the cover looks tremendous. So he really caught kind of like the mixing of the two genres.
It's really interesting to see those two characters interact because one is like the more realistic take on the dinosaur. The other is the humanistic Godzilla, fantastical version of a dinosaur. So it's going to be really interesting to see those two styles, those two wildly different dinosaur styles like on screen together.
And then I think that it'd be really fun to see that. And I like that you use the term on screen because, as you know, in Chris's work, he does Dorgon sort of as like a movie within the comic that people have found,
Yeah.
which is a really neat idea and lets them do some fun things.
Mm-hmm.
So we had written the story, and that Chris and I kind of bounced the idea around a little bit, and I said to him, "Hey man, what if we do it like the Godzilla versus Wolfman? You know, kind of like the Lost film where this group of special effects guys literally shot it in their garage, and you can catch like glimpses of it here and there, but it never really came out. So we kind of pitched a story in that it was a film where it takes place in the Dorgon. I don't want to say Dorgon universe, but
the Dorgon metaverse.
Yeah,
the metafiction, the Dorgon metafiction. Because like, there's the fiction of the movies, and there's like the fiction of the real world outside the movies, of the people making the movies.
So it takes place in the metafiction of that, like you said, and the premise is that Dorgon came out like in the 50s, 60s, did really well, and then kind of faded away, similar to Godzilla, where like he, kind of faded away in the late 70s for a little bit. So then we skip ahead to where the Atomic Rex novel comes out, and it's quickly turned into like a high-budget movie. And our idea was that we're going to have it where some of the guys who are working on this new big-budget Atomic Rex movie used to work on the Dorgon films. They got in touch with their buddies and said, "Hey, let's do this in our garage." So they shot it, and it kind of got shut down, but then years later it was able to be released. So that's kind of what Chris and I are doing, and that'll come out that way. But like you said, what we really liked was the contrasting styles of the two characters, and that you could see that change from the 1960s sort of man in a suit to the 1990s CGI of like a Jurassic Park, and how they would blend together if it was a mixed movie genre type thing. So I have high hopes that that's going to come out very well. I mean, Chris is super talented, and the few kind of designs he showed me so far look really good.
And so Chris is going to be drawing this, and you're the writer behind this?
Well, Chris and I worked together. I did most of the writing, and he went back and tweaked it. One thing that's been different for me is I'm so used to doing prose writing that I hadn't really done a comic book before.
Right.
So Chris sent me some of like what he's working on for his next Dorgon comic, just so I could see how he kind of mapped it out. So it was like, okay, this is a little bit easier. I will say one thing I found challenging, this is particularly I think with a Kaiju comic book, is that you get lots of spots where there's no dialogue. So because they're Kaiju,
Right, and you gotta let the art side take over for that.
Yes. So I try to give Chris enough word, right, like this is what I'm seeing happening in the story, almost like I was doing it from a prose perspective, and then trusting him, which I'm sure he'll do a great job of, and turning that into a visual. But it was definitely an interesting take. So Chris has been working with me a little bit on that, and we're going back and forth. But he's a great guy to work with, and the collaboration's been really fun so far.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see the challenge with that, because in the world of novels, you really have to be descriptive, because there's no visual element at all. Meanwhile, you have a very highly visual medium where when it comes to, I've learned this myself, because recently I've been working on making a bit of like a pitch comic, script, and making a comic script for my character Draco Azul, which is the big blue robot mascot I use in my videos. And I've been also talking to both Chris and Jonathan Claude, John being the writer of the first and next Fire Beast books, and they're just telling me, it's like, dude, the biggest most important part of comic writing is that you really got to cut down, write like as little as possible, and just like let the art side take over, or it's like at least be very descriptive with the art side. And then when it comes to the characters, keep it to a minimum, because I've read comic books in the past where they just unload like dialogue over dialogue to where like the dialogue balloons just take up most of the panels.
Yes.
And it would just become like a big mess. So I can understand like the challenge of that, having like kind of done that, been through that myself. I've also been like learning it as I've been doing it as well. So I can totally relate to what you've been through.
But it's coming along. Chris is good. I'm also working on a comic, an Atomic Rex comic, because everybody wants Atomic Rex, with Frank Parr and Wayne Smith with their Arrakis character. Are you familiar with those guys at all?
Yeah, I've seen Arrakis.
That's what they told me, yes, because he
Okay.
comes from Iraq, so it's Arrakis. Because I thought Arrakis, but they said, no, Arrakis. He's from Iraq. Right, yeah, that's good.
Iraq. Okay,
Yes,
Iraq is. Oh, okay, yeah. I've seen. He's the like the brownish, like the brownish tannish monster with like the horn beak, right?
yes.
Okay.
So I'm also working on, and it should hopefully be out towards the end of this year, a comic with them that'll feature Atomic Rex and Arrakis. And we had to iron out some details about how that's going to come together, but we finally got it, and they've been really fun to work with too. So that'll be coming out. It'll be another interpretation because Frank Parr does the art there, and he's different artist than Chris is. So he sent me a few kind of sketches, and I've been very pleased with them. But it's neat to see different interpretations of Atomic Rex through that lens as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Frank Parr also made a depiction of Chimera, right?
He did. Yes, he did a Chimera picture, and the reason he did it was at first we weren't sure what we could do with my characters from Severed Press because they have first refusal rights. So, and what that means is any sequel I write for any of the characters I publish with them, I have to send to them first. So they say no, I can take it somewhere else. So it was kind of funny. I had when I'd gotten done Polar Yeti, the first thing I did was pitch them a Chimera sequel, and they said that Chimera's doing well, but it's no Atomic Rex. Give us more Atomic Rex. So I was like, okay, I think I'm open here now. So we had kind of originally thought about doing a story with Arrakis and Chimera, and then I had found out from Severed Press that as long as I don't do a novel, I can do whatever I want with the character. So I was like, well, if I can do a comic book, Atomic Rex is the much more popular character. And they wanted to work with Atomic Rex in the first place anyway. So I said, okay, yeah, we'll go back and do Atomic Rex. But it'll kind of come a little bit full circle in that as soon as Chris and I get done this for GFan, we're going to work on a comic that we're going to publish where it's going to be Atomic Rex and Chimera. Because it's kind of been a dream what I've wanted to do. Yeah. And I can't wait to see what Chris does with the artwork for that. But he's very excited about it too.
Cool. Awesome. So unlike Atomic Rex versus Durantis, this is gonna be a comic in GFan magazine, is the Atomic Rex versus Chimera going to be its own separate self-published book?
Yes, yeah, it's going to be its own self-published book, unless if Kristen really seemed to want to reach out to his company that's doing his Night of the Fire Beast comics. So we can do it ourselves. It's easy enough to do it through Amazon these days, which is one of the nice things about technology. So that's a plan. We're going to do it through there, and I have very high hopes for that one. So a lot of Atomic Rex coming out in the next year, which is very cool.
Nice.
And I was contacted by a movie producer about doing a movie for it even.
Right. I remember you told me about this.
So, I think at G-Fest I just kind of got the initial contact out of the way. So I've spoken to the gentleman recently, and he had said that one of the low-budget film companies, I'm pretty sure it's Asylum, was interested, although I don't want to, throw Asylum out there if it wasn't them. But he said that they were interested to do a movie for about $1 million, which I was like, hey, I don't care. Just if you do a movie about something I wrote, I'll be happy. Okay.
Right.
But he also said that for sure Universal's interested if things like the King Kong movie do well and the Pacific Rim sequel and the Godzilla movies, but we'd have to wait a couple years on that. But he said, dude, they're talking like a $200 million budget if things come together. So I was like, okay, I'll trust you. I guess in this case, a bird in the bush is worth not one in the hand or whatever. So we're kind of... sitting back and waiting on that, but it's the type of thing where I'm not too worried about it. I'm like, if it comes to fruition, great. If not, how many projects get put up there and shot down?
True,
anyway, at least it got looked at. So,
Yeah, I know, in the past, back in the day when Pacific Rim and Godzilla 2014 were barely getting off the ground, there were rumors of other giant monster movies being confirmed or being pitched. There was the Monster Apocalypse movie with Tim Burton behind it. There was that Patrick Warburton, what was it? It was insert name here, The Prince of Monsters or something.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I forgot what it was called, but yeah, it had Patrick Warburton attached to it, playing a young American scientist.
know if he's young. He's cool,
Yeah.
but I don't know if I feel young.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be like the joke where they would get like an American actor in a Japanese movie, even though he's clearly not fit for the role.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that Nick Adams or whoever that actor was from War of the Gargantuas.
Oh, what's that guy? He's terrible.
Right. like Patrick Warburton. He's trying to play that character. That's my best Patrick Warburton I can do.
That was pretty good.
Thanks. But yeah, it is true that there have been like other projects that have been rumored or have been supposedly confirmed, and there was even like that Colossus movie, which I think is still getting made with Anne Hathaway.
I think it's still on the table. They were apparently very stupid with the way that they had pitched that to higher ups.
Let's pitch it using copyrighted images.
Yeah. They could have just put a generic T-Rex on there and been fine. You know, but I do think the concept was pretty cool from what I've read about it, and we're like, the monster.
It seemed like they were kind of taking like the Miki Sagusa from the Godzilla movies and kind of putting the spotlight on her, on that type of character.
Yeah, I really hope that comes to fruition. Actually, that project, because it did seem neat, and it's almost like the monster's like a manifestation of her subconscious, which would be a neat way to go about it. So we'll see. But if they hadn't used Godzilla and like Transor Z to kind of piss the thing, it would have come out much better.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so I did want to take this time to transition over into another question I had, which was, I know we touched a little bit on this at the beginning when you were talking about giving us your background. What was the initial spark that got you into writing in the first place? I know you mentioned like you want to use writing as a little bit of like a side project in between your job, profession as a teacher. But did you ever had any sort of any aspirations for being a writer beforehand?
You know, it's funny. I didn't have a lot. I did do a few things. I have a brother who's an author as well, by the way. And he just very quickly, he wrote a book called The References. He's an English teacher. And in The References, all the superheroes use the power of grammar to fight bad guys. It's really kind of like an offbeat, funny educational book, and he has a dinosaur in there who he calls the Saurus Rex. So we always have like this the Saurus Rex, Atomic Rex rivalry going on. But anyway, to answer your question, it was often just he and I growing up, and we couldn't do a ton of stuff in the summer. So we did start kind of writing stories to entertain each other, which I had done as a very like 12 to 14 range. We had done a bunch of them there. When I look back now, they're terrible. But at the time, it was kind of, fun to do. So that's where the seed kind of got planted to start. And it's funny, I was listening to, I guess the other day, I think it's when you had Tyler Souls and Scott Schmidt on, right? And they had mentioned that the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was kind of like a starting point for them. And I felt the same way, too, in that when I first read that, is kind of when it clicked on me, like, wow, there's all of these characters out there that are really cool, that are in a public domain, that if you wanted to do something with, you could. So I did, and that's kind of where the Shadow thing started. I didn't realize at the time Shadow was not in the public domain. But, time-wise he should be, but it's different for pulps. So anyway, that's kind of what started that off. And one of the biggest inspiration that really got me going for Kaiju was, though, and I feel like I keep coming back to him, but, he is kind of like the man, was Jeremy Robinson with his whole Nemesis series. Actually, the first book I read in a day, I couldn't put it down and, realized that was the case. And prior to that, there was only kind of Mark Saraceni's Godzilla run, if you remember that, like in the mid-90s.
I didn't grow up with them specifically, but I did come to learn of them when I started diving into the online Godzilla fan base community, and when I discovered Toho Kingdom.
Yes.
Back in like middle school or high school, when I discovered that site, I eventually came to learn of those books. Yeah.
So those are really great books, but sorry, there was no other kind of kaiju books out there until Nemesis came along, and then other things started to come from there.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like with that success, so that was a big inspiration to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that I got to talk to Jeremy, and we're friends now, and he seems to be a fan of my work as well, has been
Wow.
very cool going
Mm-hmm.
forward. But I would say that those were the things that kind of that got me interested in writing. I've also always been a huge comic book fan,
Mm-hmm.
as long as I can remember. Read comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, particular growing up, I was a big Marvel fan,
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny. I'll tell like my wife today. I'm like, look, you don't understand. When I was a kid, it wasn't like there was gang fights, but you were Marvel or you were DC. It was right.
It was like the
It
Bloods
was,
and the Crips.
yeah.
You're waiting
So I
each of them. You got one with the red bandanas with the Marvel logo on them, the blue
yes,
bandanas with the
yes.
Star logo on DC
Yep.
logo on them.
They were separated in the comic book shops. I can still see it now. Like one side was Marvel, one side was DC. It was very literal.
Uh-huh.
The DC fans used to actually call us the Marvel zombies because of just they came out, and
So
that's
that's where
where
that
that
term
came
came
from.
from. Yeah.
But those are a big inspiration on me too.
Any
Growing
personal?
up, and just,
Oh, sorry. Any personal favorite characters from Marvel?
it sounds cliche, but I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I
Mm.
mean, because Spider-Man's all of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Uh, Anybody can relate to being kind of the dorky kid in high school
yeah. Hmm.
growing up.
Hmm.
Most of us weren't a star athlete.
Hmm.
So I was always very intrigued by that. And by the fact that Spider-Man loses kind of as many fights as he wins,
Hmm.
which I always thought was relatable,
Yeah.
and that as you go through life, you have your victories and you have your losses.
Hmm.
And here's this guy who's a superhero, and he kind of does the same thing. He tries his best, and it doesn't always work out.
Hmm.
So I was a big fan of him growing up.
Cool, cool. As a side note, what do you think of the new trailer for Spider-Man: Homecoming?
I thought it was great. I'm super pumped for it.
Hmm.
I thought they caught it really well. I like Peter again better as a high school student than later on in life,
Hmm.
and to bring into that Marvel world with the humor, which is really what drives Spider-Man 2, I
Hmm.
think will do very well. The scenes with him and Tony are great because Robert Downey he was really born to play that role.
Hmm.
He himself is kind of like an alcoholic, over the
Yeah.
top guy. So
Right.
it's not hard for him to do Tony Stark. But I think it's very. What about you? I thought it was very
Oh
good.
yeah, I was really interested in it. I was really digging kind of like the old school what's the writer's name? He did like the Breakfast Club. He did
Yes, Landis,
Land.
right? No,
I
not
know his son,
Landis.
I know his son is Max Landis. Um, oh wow, I feel really bad right now.
It's not John Landis, right? It's he did like Werewolf in London and stuff.
Right, right.
Although, yeah, I keep switching topics on you, but
No
did you see the
problem.
Power Rangers trailer? I thought that was totally the Breakfast Club when I was watching it
Oh
at
yeah, yeah.
first.
I totally got that vibe as well. It's like I got like the Breakfast Club meets Chronicle, and I was really digging.
Yes.
I was really digging that. However, I
Yeah.
can see. I actually like when I first saw the Power Rangers trailer. Being someone who grew up with the Power Rangers since I was a little child, since I was a toddler actually. I was really digging. I probably like felt more positive about the trailer than most people. And looking back on it now, it's like this can go in either direction. This could go like really good and interesting for people who are like me, who are personally wanted to see a more serious take on Power Rangers. I know it sounds silly, but yeah, that's kind of how I always wanted to see. It's like when I saw these superhero movies getting made in the 2000s and 2010s, I was like,
Yeah, totally agree.
I want to see Power Rangers get that treatment too. And it's like, where's the 90s kids' time to shine? Um,
Yeah.
But I can easily see this sort of premise. What's the phrase? I can easily see this kind of premise backfiring as well.
It's a tough line to walk because it's sort of like the simplistic camp value of the original series is
Hmm.
one of the things that made it so enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It's the wacky, over the top, not giving a damn about how.
yes,
That made Power Rangers unique amongst out of the bunch, and I guess yeah, you can go too far and you lose that. And on the other hand, you could still take like the core concept and make it work as its own thing. You're right. It's like you can get too far or you can get too close. I mean, we've seen what happens when you try to recreate like the recent seasons of Power Rangers. It was they've gotten a really bad reputation for trying to recapture what made the first season so great, but in the end they just repeat a lot of the bad mistakes that were made back then. It's charming because, like, the first season was charming because that's 20 years ago. It's like, oh, look how cute, look how stupid that thing was that we liked.
Yeah.
Trying to do that now, unironically, it's like, ugh.
I have high hopes for that movie, though. I think it'll be pretty good. We'll see.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, as a mech fan, looking at the Megazords and the Zords, I'm like, why?
Yeah.
just why?
I'm with you. I get the Viking kind of look from the original one wouldn't have carried over today, with the upright T-Rex, but it's like,
even then, it's like. I don't mind changing up the style, like moving away from the original Jurenja Super Sentai design with the horns and everything. But like, I just really do not like the aesthetic they've thrown on there.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah. What I hope doesn't occur is that they try to be too Pacific Rim and not enough Power Rangers. So I'm a little concerned with the look of the Megazord that might be the case. It looks very Gypsy Dangerous to me. I don't know about you when you look at it.
I agree that it has like the same body structure as Gypsy Danger, but I think like the overall aesthetic is drastically different. I would have preferred an aesthetic similar to that of Gypsy Danger, just like flat panels as armor. Instead of this really overly complicated Bayformer look that they're going for.
Yeah, it does have a Bayformer look to it, though. So
I just like something that's always irked me about most depictions of modern day robots, where they want to be as overly complicated as possible, rather than going for a very simple, streamlined, basic look that the Jaegers from Pacific Rim had. Because I love those robots.
Yeah, me too, man. That's one of my favorite movies, actually.
Yeah. Oh, me too. Yeah, totally. In fact, I even got like was it me or did I get like a very strong Pacific Rim vibe from the prologue of Atomic Rex?
Oh, yes, there's a very strong line there. In fact, I said Atomic Rex was my wanting to see Godzilla take on everybody he never got to. So the characters, especially in the prologue, are very Pacific Rim-ish. In fact, I've described it to people in that if humanity lost in Pacific Rim is what Atomic Rex is.
Yeah, basically. That's what I was thinking. Like, this is Pacific Rim gone wrong.
Yes, yeah, that's what it is. So you've got kind of like those
where they didn't cancel the apocalypse.
Yeah, they did not cancel the apocalypse there. And that's what I did there and I tried to homage it with the double named robots. So like the main robot is Steel Samurai, sort of like a Gypsy Danger or Cherno Alpha.
Yeah, that's actually where I got the name for my mascot, Draco Azul.
Oh, okay.
By copying that. Yeah.
Speaking of which, I'm excited to see, man. Any luck on getting the Draco Azul Atomic Rex artwork together?
Oh, I'd totally be down for that. Oh, you mean like for like the title card for this podcast that the audience is seeing right now? Yeah, I got my as of the time of this recording, it is I did contact my friend Jacob Baker, who is the guy who I've had on this channel several times, and on the Sons of Sarazawa podcast, we call him Jacob Baker, the Kaiju Maker, because he makes those really cool, like actual, like full-on suits. Did you saw got the fan film Godzilla Battle Royale?
Yes.
Did you saw like the second Godzilla suit, like Godzilla turns into Hyper Godzilla?
Yes. Yeah.
He made Hyper Godzilla.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And he's been like my main art guy for this channel. And I asked him, do you want to make another title card for this episode? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm totally down for it. So cool. Yeah, hopefully maybe after the holidays, which I believe that I'll upload this interview. Hopefully he'll have that ready and raring to go.
Okay, you can edit this part out if you want to, so we're not like Deadpooling people that are looking at it as I'm asking about it.
I think it's kind of interesting. I think I want to keep this in. Kind of like a weird meta thing where like we're referencing like the process of the podcast as the people are listening to the podcast.
It works. We're real people, so it comes across that way, you know?
Yeah. I want to portray ourselves as like genuine people.
Yeah.
So I guess like getting back into the main focus of things, sure. This whole kind of spiraled out of like a Spider-Man, I think.
Oh, well.
No problem there. Oh yeah, absolutely, no problem there. my next question was, what have been some of your biggest influences when it came to your writing style, and along with the biggest influences when it came to your characters and monsters, be they from real life or from other forms of fiction that you've been exposed to over the years?
Well, as far as the monsters and the characters I want to do, I've always been a big Harryhausen fan,
Mm-hmm.
Ray Harryhausen. So a lot of what I picture comes from his work and his movies. And then it also comes a lot from him utilizing mythology for a lot of his work. Because, like I said before, there really wasn't much in terms of kaiju writing before the Saraceni series in the 90s. And then there's been a much larger explosion now, which is great. But as a kid, like my class would take me to the library in like fourth grade. It was like, you got to pick a book out. I was like, well, I want a monster book, but there's no monster.
Mm-hmm.
Although I did find a lot of mythology books, which if you kind of look back, there's really like a lot of kaiju in mythology. It's
They're kind of like the original, the OG kaijus.
The OGs, yeah.
Yeah.
The OGs was like the Krakens and the Cyclops.
And the Hydras.
Yeah, exactly. So,
the Hydra is essentially your King Ghidorah of the ancient Greek days.
Exactly. And I feel like you can look back and see a lot. In fact, Operation Rock, which I wrote, was a nod to the Rock from mythology, and Rodan, I think, is heavily influenced by, kind of the myths of the Rock and other similar characters. So,
was Chimera, by any chance, your King Kong?
Very much so. At first, that's what I was going for. I've always been a huge Kong fan. The original Kong, to me, is the greatest movie ever. Mm-hmm. I love the storytelling in it. Within like 20 minutes, you're on the island and Anne's captured and stuff. Mm-hmm. And for Chimera, I wanted that type of character. I've also always liked the kind of very physical throwdown type fights you get with Kong because he doesn't have a beat weapon. Mm-hmm. So I did end up giving Chimera that kind of sonic boom, which is actually cool. I was doing research and found out that sperm whales actually possess that ability, which is kind of neat. So I thought, okay, well, this carries over. Plus, it's not like a full-on blast will go with this, and it can disrupt the central nervous system. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool. But yes, Chimera very heavily Kong influenced for me, and one thing I really liked doing there was incorporating mythology, and in particular, getting the confrontation with Thor. I always thought it'd be neat to see Thor and Kong kind of go at it.
Yeah. So it was very interesting. It felt a little bit. It kind of reminded me of Frankenstein versus Baragon, because it's like a humanoid going up against like a straight up human person going up against a monster.
And it was also a nice nod to my Marvel fandom to be able to throw Thor in there. Was very specific. Couldn't look like Chris Hemsworth. So it's like, okay, we'll make sure we make him look like a mythological take. And then, of course, going back to my influences, a big fan of the 60s, 70s show of Godzilla's. Mm-hmm. Again, you get a lot of that physical fighting with those characters, and I felt like that the monsters then in particular really had a personality to them, where they came across as either heroic or evil, as opposed to, and I'm not knocking this, but the later films where they're more like force of nature-ish. As far as writing style goes, I've always been a huge fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs. So I try to emulate his writing style. I think any Kaiju fan too, if they haven't yet, will do themselves a favor to go back and read his Pellucidar series, if nothing else. His Tarzan books are great, as well as his John Carter books. But one thing that I really try to push in my books that I'm a big fan of Burroughs for doing is the action. Where, I think in Chimera, when I counted up, there's something like 17 monster battles, and as my novels go on, that's actually like the low number that occurs. So as they go forward, it's more and more. But he always did a very good job of being able to have a lot of action scenes and have the action be part of the storytelling. So it wasn't just like action for the sake of action, but the action that's occurring flows naturally with the story, and I felt like that's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of his and can't put his books down, and I wanted that to translate into my work as well.
I see. Let's see. I didn't want to. That leads me to another question I want to ask. Was what sort of research were you able to put into your books? Because yeah, in what I've read of your work, I've noticed a lot of attention to detail in terms of animal biology, human psychology, and as well as like various cultures referenced in these books.
Yeah, I had to do a lot of research, in particular for Chimera and Operation Rock. Chimera, for the people who don't know real quick, it's a book where the ancient gods, the Greeks, the Mesopotamians, and the Asgardians have kind of returned to Earth and see themselves as guardians of Earth. So they don't necessarily want to destroy the Earth. They just want to wipe out humanity because we are causing so much damage to the planet. So what the humans have is a gorilla sperm whale lion hybrid called Chimera that they use to kind of battle these gods. The gods use the monsters from their mythology to counteract this threat, more or less. But I had to do a lot of research there. I was pretty familiar with Greek mythology, so I did go back and do a little bit of research in that to make sure I just had the characters correct, as well as Norse mythology. But I had to do a lot of research on Mesopotamian mythology for the middle section of the book. And it's always fun, though. Like, I wanted to make sure that those came across, as realistic or as true to the myths as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun. And then for Operation Rock, I had to do a ton more research, actually, because in Operation Rock is also an acronym where it stands for Retaliation on Cryptids.
Oh,
and
okay.
So it makes a little more sense, right? Not to mention that the protagonists are giant birds that have cybernetic enhancements, so like the rocks from mythology. But had to do a lot of research on cryptids for that, and actually reached out to a few cryptozoologists who were very cool about, pointing me in the right direction. And I said to them, like, hey, I'm doing a fictional story, just so you know, I'm not doing like, what you've already done with your research and whether, they believe it or not. But they were very helpful about, well, this is what this cryptid is like, and this is the description of this cryptid. And I told them my premise is terrorists have captured the world cryptids and blown them up to monster size. So I thought it was really cool, though. And, have kind of helped me promote that as well as like a fun thing about like, here's somebody who's using our research. Yes, it's fictional, but it's the stuff that we did find out about the reports we're getting from these cryptids. So that was kind of interesting too.
Very nice. Just wondering, are you familiar with a YouTuber by the name of Trey the Explainer?
No, but should I check him out?
Oh yeah, totally. He mostly does a lot of dinosaur-based videos, going deep. He would like take certain videos called Paleo Profiles, and he would dedicate each episode to a certain species of prehistoric animal, or he would make topics saying like which dinosaurs had feathers, and then he'd look at everything based on all the scientific evidence. And he's also recently started doing a series called Cryptid Profiles, where he would take take a good, hard, serious look at all the cryptids, at like certain cryptids, based on all the evidence. He did one for like Mothman. He did the what was it, the Flatwoods Lake Monster?
Oh, the Flatwoods Monster, yeah.
Yeah, with like the dome head.
Yes.
He did the Ropen, which was that like African pterodactyl sort of thing. And he's recently doing like a multi-part for the big one, Nessie the Loch Ness Monster.
I would definitely be checking those out.
Yeah.
Most of those guys did appear in Rock, except for the Flatwoods one, which just because his design is so weird, I couldn't like figure out a good way to incorporate him into a confrontation. But I am, after, let me back up a little bit. After I get to my newest book, I'm going to do is the sequel to Rock, which is called Operation Meg, which is going to involve giant sharks, and it's also an acronym for Monster Extermination Group, but it'll focus more on sea cryptids, and then using enhanced Megs to go fight them.
Yeah.
And research, too. My newest book I'm working on, so I've had to do a lot of research for, is called Kaiju Corps. And the premise of Kaiju Corps is that our heroes are 4 experiments that are soldiers who are people that are like wear kaiju, so they can turn into kaiju. So I haven't really seen much done with that, which I was excited about. And the premise for this one's sort of like a reverse Pacific Rim, in that I did research if aliens were real, how would they most likely explore the universe? So one thing that came up is that they would do it similar to the way that we do, where we don't actually go to Mars. We send robots to Mars, right?
Right.
So in this case, I thought one interesting concept that came across was the idea of sending out a signal which could co-opt any advanced enough civilization's technology to start creating robots to harvest what they want and send it back to their home planet, which I thought was kind of a neat idea. So in the book I'm working on now, a signal does co-opt Earth's technology, and in every major city, I had to do research on what they're kind of producing there that would fit into that mold. So, for instance, like Detroit, they basically used cars to make the giant robots because Detroit's known for making cars. Okay, so I today just wrote a chapter on Cleveland, which apparently they have quite a few airline production companies out there. So that they, in this instance, they utilized, the airline makes to create giant robots. And then for each city that appears after there, I had to do research on, okay, what's the kind of main manufacturing that's occurring in this city and go from there.
I see. So let's see. Oh, that did remind me of another question I had, and I noticed that like the word kaiju keeps being brought up again from like time after time. I noticed like kaiju has kind of become like the Godzilla fan community's word to refer to like all of these giant monsters.
Yes.
And even it's kind of like sort of like how in Japan, kaiju is simply a word that can mean like any sort of monster, much like how anime is made for just animation in general, be it American or Japanese. But in America, we tend to take those words and use it to specifically reference anything that is from Japan or is in the style of that thing from Japan. And so I want to know, how do you feel about the use of the word kaiju being spread among your books and among other people's books? Do you think there's a possibility that it could be overused to an extent? Because the thing I've noticed with, the reason why I asked this is because comparing giant monster fiction to, let's say, giant robot fiction, with giant robots, it seems like many people tend to try to create their own words for giant robots, be it the mobile suits from Gundam, or Jaegers from Pacific Rim, or Megadeuces from the Big O. And I've noticed that within the fan community, everyone is very comfortable with the word kaiju. And I want to know, what do you think about that? The use of the word kaiju amongst all these projects.
To be honest, and you might know this better than me, I think specifically the giant monsters should be referred to as dai kaiju. That's correct, right? For more like
true, yeah.
Giant monster?
That specific dai means big, yeah.
Okay. No, I think it's a good word. It does, and the reason that I went with it is, for one, because it was very heavily used in Pacific Rim. So I think in terms of the culture, not just with kaiju fans, but outside of there, it gained a little bit of notoriety as a word just to mean giant monsters. And then, to be honest, when I was writing the book, whenever I do a search for a new book, I'll type in kaiju when I was looking for it as a fan. So it seemed to hit to me that if I want people to find this book, I need to be able to utilize the word kaiju in it.
Right.
So that was there. But I think it's probably a good word, even if it doesn't necessarily mean giant monster or Godzilla type monster, in the fact that we in the fan community can utilize it and know that we're referring to something that comes under that umbrella, and it maybe it just sounds a little bit better because it is Japanese than just saying, oh, I'm a giant monster fan. You say, I'm a kaiju fan.
Yeah, it does add a certain bit of flair to it.
Yeah.
Like, it's a bit of like that hipster vibe. Excuse me, I enjoy kaiju films, not your silly little monster fiction. Thank you very much.
Well, anything to make us more, of a community and feel like we own something.
Something that'll give us our own identity.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's see. Oh, I did want to go into what are some of your earliest memories with giant monster films or giant monster media? Or how were you first exposed to this subgenre of science fiction?
I can actually remember just being a very young kid. My dad was a big fan of monster movies growing up. In particular, again, the Harryhausen films. He's a huge Harryhausen fan. So you might even be too young to remember this, but they used to do kind of like the creature features on Saturday afternoons on like, like local stations. So that became kind of like a staple growing up with my dad and my brother and I sitting down and watching these films as they came on. So you'd get like Clash of the Titans, or you'd get like Jason and the Argonauts, or you'd get Godzilla versus Monster Zero. So we grew up watching those and just kind of fell in love with them. And the first one I can remember watching is King Kong versus Godzilla. And
nice. So that was your first Godzilla movie.
That was my first one, was King Kong versus Godzilla, and just thinking, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen as a kid, And you look back now, it hasn't exactly aged great,
right.
But it still has a good nostalgia feel, although I have high hopes for Legendary with what they're doing. Their Kong trailer looks tremendous. So that was my first kind of exposure there. And, this is interesting, too, and I've kind of heard a few of your other people bring it up, that the internet has really helped the kaiju fan be able to find other kaiju fans, because as a young kid, like most kids knew who Godzilla was, so you could talk to them about Godzilla, and they kind of liked it, but they didn't really have any kind of concept about any of the other monsters that went along with it, or if you brought up Gamera, people had no idea who you were talking about.
Unless you have like that very small section of MST3K fans who do remember the Gamera episodes.
Exactly. The Gamera episodes of MST3K. I still love MST3K. I was actually very lucky. I knew one guy who lived in Japan for a while. His dad was in the military, so he knew all this kind of stuff and introduced me to like, hey, man, there's Ultraman outside of Australia, because up until then, I'd always thought that, Ultraman is this Australian TV show.
So you watched Towards the Future.
Yes, I guess it was Towards the Future as a kid.
Yeah. That's the Ultraman with like the spandex suit, and he was due to Earth's pollution, Ultraman cannot exist on Earth for more than 3 minutes. Actually, the narrator had a very quiet, soothing voice, like the kind of voice that can lull you to sleep.
Yeah, that's true.
What will Ultraman do now?
But he was kind of the guy that showed me even a larger picture of what was there. Like he had videos of like Space Amoeba and Doggerrat and all these other cool things that I had never ever even knew existed. It was like, these ones are so cool, but you're not like a Tuesday afternoon or something.
It's like a whole new world.
Yeah.
Like being exposed to all this like a large, like this large universe, this large like culture beyond the stuff that we've seen. Yeah, it's really cool. I definitely agree with you and to what my other friends have said, that the internet has like opened up the horizons, has opened the gates for and allowed this information that would have been impossible to find like 10, 20, 30 years ago. And it's easier to have all this information that only at the click of a mouse or a push of a button to gain as much information from this, as much of this as possible, more so than even people in Japan, you would say.
Yeah, I've heard that. Is it true like the kaiju genre is not as big in Japan necessarily, the hardcore following, as it is here in the U.S.?
Right. It's like that's kind of like the case for most forms of fiction in general. When it comes to people in Japan, it's like their love for these sort of fictional properties are kept to a extreme minimum, where you're not really allowed. Well, society doesn't really allow you to show your love for this sort of stuff without being labeled a weirdo or being labeled what would you call it? A weirdo, or being labeled an outcast. That's what I want to use, an outcast. Yeah. So if there's anyone here who is obsessed with that sort of stuff, it's usually kept on the down low, very kept to their private lives. There's no real social hub for them to like interact with one another outside of like the internet. I would guess. Even then, the people I have talked to who felt comfortable enough to discuss about what they love to me, because they say, this guy, looks comfortable enough talking about how much he likes Godzilla. I want to share with him what I am obsessed with. Even then, I haven't seen a lot of people who like or have any sort of like fondness for giant monster media. Maybe to a very brief extent, Super Sentai or
Okay.
or Ultraman, but even then it's like they don't keep up with the current Ultraman or the current Sentai. That's for the
Okay.
little kids. They just remember the stuff that they grew up with personally,
I got
like
you.
Ultra 7 or whatever. Um,
Right.
in terms of mainstream popularity, really it's all the giant monster stuff really boils down to Ultraman, Super Sentai, and Kamen Rider, and that's only for little kids. So all that stuff is usually
Right.
seen as like a little kids thing, similar to how we, well, most, not us, you and I, but the general population of Americans or Westerners tend to think of Power Rangers as strictly a kids thing.
Okay.
And so, like, the kids, they can enjoy that sort of stuff, but by the time they enter middle school or high school, it's like, okay, you gotta cut that shit out. You gotta start getting serious now. Stop being obsessed with this stuff. Get focused on your studies so you can work towards a better education, work towards a
Okay.
job.
So this is a cultural difference. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, very, very, very much so. Whereas in America, I've noticed how we tend to have like the freedom to like to hold on to the things we love most and to
Yeah.
have that feel free. We're more free. I feel like we feel more free to express what we love, and we're allowed to hold on to what we love. I mean, that's like,
Yeah.
like despite you and I being of different ages, here we are on the internet. We're just freely talking about, the stuff that we
Yeah.
grew up with and very similar stuff, I may add. Yeah, yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. And I hope I didn't go too far on a tangent there. I just had to ask you. I had you
Oh,
on
no,
the
no, no
screen.
problem, because I feel like this is a question that a lot of people tend to ask me, and a lot of people, there's a question that many people have in their minds. So I'm always willing to show this stuff there, because I don't want, because a lot of Americans tend to, or at least a lot of Westerners tend to have this idea that Japan is this very perfect place. It's like the land of kaiju and anime, when it's really
Right.
not.
Right.
It's like, let's be real here. Yeah. So, okay. So we talked about how you were first exposed to to giant monster movies. So what have been some of your personal favorite films and creatures overall?
Oh, great question. I would have to say my favorite Godzilla's number one. It kind of goes without saying. And I've always been a huge fan of the um, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, the 90s
Oh,
one.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I always feel like it might be called something different, right? But I think I usually see it like on DVDs or whatever as Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of that one. I always loved the way that I'm going to mispronounce this, Heisei, the 90s Godzilla,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
way that he looked, kind of like much more realistic.
Mhm.
And, I know he was more of a force of nature than a good guy or a bad guy, but when I was in high school in the 90s, so like that kind of fit for me better at that time.
Mhm.
And huge fan of that. Like I said, I think King Kong might be the greatest movie ever made, the 33 one.
Would
I
would you
know
say that that's your favorite film of all time?
I might go my all-time favorite film, although it's rivaled by Army of Darkness just because Bruce
Ah.
Campbell's so awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, gotta go with that.
Now, imagine if you made like a sequel to Polar Yeti or Chimera, where they're kind of like your King Kong analogs, and just put in a Bruce Campbell type character in there.
I so want to. I just
Or
don't
no,
know if the
like you say you want to put Godzilla against characters you've never seen before. Have him fight Bruce Campbell.
that would be great. There was actually supposed to be a movie where that occurred.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was apparently a quick tangent.
Hmm.
After Godzilla 2000 came out, I've read a couple reports that the company who produced it here in the U.S. bought the idea for a sequel that was supposed to star Bruce Campbell and Jamie Lee Curtis, sort of as like,
Oh.
the hero and the heroine in the story. And I'm like, wow, how great would that be? Bruce Campbell versus Godzilla. It's the one thing we haven't seen Bruce do yet.
Mhm.
So, that would have been great, I think, his humor. But to get back to your question,
Mhm.
yeah, the original King Kong might be my all-time
Mhm.
favorite movie. Again, it says that I like quick paces to a story, and I feel like that has a quick pace. Even today, the special effects still hold up pretty well, considering it's 80-some years old.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely love that movie too. In fact, it's one of the few movies I brought over to Japan.
Nice!
Yeah.
Good call, man. Like I said, Harryhausen's work sticks out. A huge fan of Jason and the Argonauts,
Hmm.
and that kind of ties into the Bruce Campbell thing too, because really Army of Darkness is just like an updated version with a little bit of craziness with Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah, yeah.
So, That one I heavily, and then the '90s Gamera trilogy is tremendous as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you can see a lot of my writing where that comes across. Like I feel like in Chimera and Operation Rock, you get a lot of that '90s Gamera type feel. So
Cool, cool.
those two be some of my favorite ones.
And what would you say, like among like the pantheon of Toho kaiju, what would be your personal favorite outside of Godzilla and King Kong?
Outside of those two, I've always been a big Rodan fan, which is why Rocky came out.
Yeah.
And I feel like Rodan's kind of underutilized. In fact, I hold the original Rodan movie in very high regard as far as like the storytelling aspect of that comes across very well. So and when I hold it compared to other Toho movies, and I feel like Rodan kind of got a little bit put as like Godzilla's Robin.
Yeah, yeah, they pretty much so. It's actually like, I guess like they kind of made Anguirus his Robin, and they made like Rodan his like Catwoman, sort of like his on again, off again partner.
That's a much better analogy. I'm a huge Anguirus fan too, but I was always a big Rodan fan, and never kind of got to see outside the original one, a movie where he kind of got his due. I felt like
he got really screwed over in the Heisei series.
Right? Like, we could have seen
even after he powers up into Fire Rodan, he just gets swatted like a fly by Super Mecha Godzilla.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, you're done. I'm hoping I've heard this rumor creep up that Rodan's going to appear in Kong Skull Island.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, in fact, the guy who's the movie producer that I'm working with has said, I've heard that might be the case. I'm like, that would
so it's
so
like possibly
awesome.
got like some like inside scoop sort of thing.
Yeah,
Possible inside scoop.
Possible. He's not sure. He's not that typed into it. It's not like his primary concern, but I did ask him about it. He's like, I've heard that come up. And I'm like, well, it makes sense. Like, if there's any monster you could put on a Skull Island that would fit there from the Toho universe outside of Gorosaurus, but we've already seen that. Like Rodan, right?
Yeah, totally. Imagine, like, you heard it here, folks, for everybody. It's like, Rodan confirmed. No.
It's a big possible, okay? Let's not go around saying Matt said that this was the case, because I'm going to hate mail.
It's like, I'm blaming it all on you in case this is wrong. It's not even like Rodan. It just turns out to be like a big bird.
Yeah, and we get a condor instead, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, you're going to get that big bird. Yeah, that big flying mess of feathers.
or it could be the giant claw. That'd be even worse, I suppose. So
or better, depending on your perception of it.
True. Movie's not without its charm. But back to your question, I always was a big Rodan fan. Always loved that character. And as far as anybody else outside of Godzilla that really stuck out to me, like you said, Anguirus, I've always been a fan of. He's kind of that scrappy Wolverine type fighter, I feel like, when you see Anguirus in a movie. And I've actually always liked their take on Frankenstein.
Oh, yeah, me too.
And Frankenstein Conquers the World. So I was always kind of hoping they would have done more with that. I know there was like a lot of rumors about Godzilla versus Frankenstein that never came to fruition. But I always thought that was a really neat idea to see kind of like a classic monster scaled up to kaiju size. So that's one of... again, my favorite movies. And Baragon really came across in that film as like a hateable monster at first. Like he eats those chickens and stuff. It's crazy. But
and he's harassing Mr. Ed.
Yeah, what's up with that? Like, just leave it alone. So I would say those creatures. I hope that comes across as good answers to your fans.
Oh yeah, totally. And have you ever had any experience with other giant Japanese monsters besides the usual Godzilla and Gamera? Like any other giant monster theme Japanese giant monster properties?
Yeah. I'm always looking for new ones to check out.
You mentioned you mentioned you saw Ultraman Towards the Future, right?
Yes, and I've since gone back and seen the original run of Ultraman, which I liked a lot. Although I have to tell you, I was actually a bigger fan of. I was lucky enough to track down Ultra Q on DVD.
Oh, yeah.
And special effects are dated, but I felt like the stories were actually very good. I mean, you could kind of really see the X-Files, for instance, taking kind of a nod from Ultra Q going forward. So I really am a big fan of Ultra Q, going back and looking at it. I'd love to see them do an updated version of that.
Yeah, I think they did made it called Ultra Q. Well, I know they made they made like a follow-up to Ultra Q. I'm not sure if it was a follow-up or a straight-up remake, but it was like Ultra Q Dark Galaxy or something like that. I'm gonna check it out right now. Sorry.
No problem. I also really like Big Man Japan as like a satire of the series.
I heard a lot about that. I've heard some mixed things, but I'm rather intrigued by the more down-to-earth, kind of depressing take on that.
Yeah, it really is kind of it's a depressing satire where it's funny, but like the story behind the story is kind of depressing as you go into it. But it was very interesting to check out. So I do like that movie quite a bit. And I like wacky stuff too. I'm dying to track down that Kaiju Mono movie I can watch over here. Because I saw the trailer for it and I was like, this looks freaking hilarious. I'm dying to see this. So, because one thing I like about Kaiju is that serious movies work, but it's also you can't take it too seriously. So I think the movies that come across like that, where it's like, oh, this is kind of wacky and zany, have a nice fit in there too.
Yeah, totally. Let's see. Yeah, that's another thing, one of those things, like we were just mentioning this with Power Rangers, that you gotta have the like right balance between like taking yourself just serious enough for people to be invested in your characters and story plot, and then like wacky enough to be like entertaining and having that same fun-loving sense of like childhood spirit and enthusiasm.
Yeah, in fact, a good example, and I don't mention this book as much, but I did do a book called I self-published, The Kaiju and the Crime Fighter, which I basically got the idea from the Lost movie of this Batman versus Godzilla, which is kind of in the 60s. And I thought, that would have been great. And apparently there was some talk about Adam West might have been in the mix to be in that movie, which I know some people hate Adam West Batman. I think he's hilarious.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that would have been good. So I did kind of like a little bit more serious than Adam West, but I have a Batman-like character taking on a Godzilla-like character in that novel, which was a self-published one. So it can be checked out. But it was really fun to do, and not always do. I feel like a lot of my novels that I do for Separate Press come across as dark, and I don't want people to think I'm like a Frank Miller, dark, depressing dude all the time. So it's fun to go back and do a little more zany type story.
Let's see. Oh, okay, so I just found the name for these, like, Ultra Q follow-ups. There was apparently an Ultra Q movie that I could barely find any information from 1990. There was... Yeah, apparently. There's, it was called Ultra Q the Movie, Legend of the Stars. And then in 2004, there was a full-on sequel to Ultra Q called Ultra Q Dark Fantasy that was 26 episodes long.
Really?
And, yeah. And after that, there was another TV show called Neo Ultra Q. And let's see, when did that come out? Neo Ultra Q was 2013, so this is rather new, with 12 episodes.
I gotta check YouTube right now.
Yeah, okay, so we have Ultra Q, the movie, which is probably super rare and you can't find any information from, Ultra Q, Dark Fantasy, from the early 2000s, and Neo Ultra Q.
I can only find clips online, but I'll have to see if I can. I got Legend of the Movie on YouTube, actually, so I'll check that out.
Oh, wow.
Cool. It's probably going to be taken down by the time of your broadcast, so,
when was it uploaded? Can you check?
Yeah, hold on. I just closed it out.
I'll send you the links to each of them.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, just got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just sending the next 2 links. And the last one. There we go. Okay.
It was uploaded 5 months ago, Legend of the Stars one.
Okay.
It's uploaded relatively recently.
Right. Okay, so if it hasn't been taken down by now, there's a good chance I don't know, it depends. Like, YouTube copyright stuff is, like, all over the place. Like, there have been times where, like, I get a copyright claim on one video that's been there for, like, half a year or a year, and it's like, wait, now you decide that you have a problem with this? Well, let's
but I'll
see.
check it out. Like I said, I was a big fan of the original series, so hopefully the more updated, better special effects will come across well as well.
Yeah.
And it really took, despite the some of the goofy monsters, it takes a very serious approach with those. I mean, you've seen the original Ultra Q, right? Like a very
I've only seen the first episode, though. I've only seen the first episode with Gomez and Litera.
Oh, dude, the rest of them are worth checking out
Oh,
for
cool. Okay.
sure. If you like X-Files,
hmm
supernatural type
hmm
shows, it's worth going back and taking a look at.
The only problem is like I really want to see them like I want to really want to own the Shout Factory DVD. The only problem is like the Shout Factory DVDs for Ultra 7 and Ultra Q are a little bit pricey, and this was like before I moved to Japan, so it's like
Uh,
and even then when I went to I think I tried looking for them at this year's G Fest, but I believe that most of the copies were sold out by then.
no, I think I got them just by I did get mine from Amazon, and I just traded in a bunch of other DVDs to get it, because you can like buy
Yeah.
them from. But it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Right, right. Let's see. To go on another little tangent. The because it was. Have you heard about the controversy between Tsuburaya Productions and Chayo?
No.
Oh, okay. It's a really interesting story. There was an episode of Kaiju Cast that covered it with August Ragone there to kind of give the details of this like legal dispute between the two. Essentially, there's this company called Chayo, which is in Thailand, I believe.
Uh-huh.
They, in a way, legally stole the international distribution rights for the first 6 Ultra series
Oh,
of Ultra Q, Ultraman, Ultra 7, all the way through Ultraman Taro, I believe.
okay.
So they had like, so yeah, it was essentially Ultra Q and the first 5 Ultramen and Jumborgase. And
Wow.
they were able to steal the international, steal, I'm going to say, steal in quotations because it's
Yeah.
all legal,
Yeah.
the international distribution rights for those 6 shows, because they had a document that had the not in Japan. I've noticed that they, instead of using signatures, they use a stamp, and everyone has their
Okay.
own little stamp. Even I got myself one of those stamps when I moved to Japan, and it would have like your name in kanji, or in my case, because I have a foreign name, it's written in a different lettering style called katakana. So instead, it
Okay.
would have like my last name Perez or Perezu in
Yeah.
Japanese speak.
Yeah.
Perezu. um, so they were able to use many people think they had a document that supposedly has the signature stamp of the dude who was in charge of Tsuburaya, Noboru Tsuburaya, who was Eiji Tsuburaya's son. And
Okay.
so after Noboru Tsuburaya passed away, then Child said, "Oh, hey, by the way, now that he's dead and can back this up, we actually have a contract here that said that he borrowed money for us, and in exchange he can give us the rights to his TV shows." And
Wow.
Tsuburaya started, the company Tsuburaya started disputing this, saying, no, that stamp is obviously fake. There's so many factual errors in this document. There's no way Noboru could have done this without telling us. And after maybe 20 years worth of legal disputes, the Chayo was able to get the rights. And that's why we've been able to get Ultraman, Ultra 7, and Ultra Q on DVD so far,
Oh, with the Shout Factory?
with the Shout Factory and Mill Creek with the first Ultraman.
No, well, we'll take it because I have most of those series and they're all grades.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And a while back, they announced that Chayo announced that they wanted to have Blu-ray releases of all the shows that they had that they have at their disposal. But that was about a year and a half ago, or 2 years, I want to say. So it's I really doubt that we're really going to get any more DVDs. So that led to my original question. What do you think? Do you think we'll possibly get more DVDs of the original Ultraman, or do you think we'll probably be getting more of the digital distribution thing, like with Crunchyroll recently, putting out older and newer Ultraman shows on Crunchyroll?
I think digital's the wave of the future
hmm
uh, for movies and pretty much anything that's coming out in any format. So I would not be at all surprised to see that kind of be the wave of the future. It's easier for people to store. I know just for myself, I used to have an entire library of DVDs.
hmm
That I had 2 kids and needed to clear out 2 rooms in my house. So,
hmm
I've converted everything to digital, and I
hmm
basically just purchase only digital movies at this point. And I know a lot of other people going that way too. So,
hmm I see. Okay, so I guess switching gears a bit,
yeah.
because you are the first guest on the show whose profession has been in the world of novels. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of working on a book as opposed to a more visual medium?
That's a really good question. Um, I'll tell you, having just started doing a few comic books, so I'll kind of answer your question in reverse format.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on this earlier, it's so much easier as a writer, time-wise, to do the comics than it is to do a novel. Because, like, the story I did for Chris, it only took me like a day to do the Atomic Rex and Dorgon crossover, because the artist is doing so much work with the storytelling as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see how much more quickly those get churned out. So that's definitely an advantage, that it's very quick to get done. Now, I would think a potential disadvantage is if you have a disagreement with the artist who's doing your work.
Mm-hmm.
So far, I've been very lucky to work with Chris Martinez, and that we're definitely on the same page, and things are going well there. So I would say that the time that it takes, like, I'm able to get a novel done even when I'm working in about 3 to 5 months, give or take, to do like a 65 to 75,000 word novel. But it does take a lot of time, obviously, to do that. And then editing that takes so much time and is so long, because you think 75,000 words, I'll read it over like 3 times before I send it to Severed Press, and even they then find missing words and stuff that I just kind of fill in as I go through it. So that's difficult. A plus would be, though, is I've always been a fan of the concept in movies and books, and that whatever the reader pictures is almost better than anything I could possibly make.
Mm-hmm.
So in novels, that comes across much, much easier. Where the ogre character, for instance, in Atomic Rex, I've had people write to me, and some people say, like, oh, that was such a great Hulk kind of homage that you did. And other people will write to me and say, like, you must have taken kind of like the darkest serial killers in history and kind of put them into this character. And I purposely kind of left the description I thought of ogre vague, and I want to see how people kind of responded to that. Now, in a comic book, people have a picture of what that character looks like right off the bat, so they kind of tie it to what the visual is telling them. But by being able to do it in a novel, it gives a little bit more freedom for people to fill in how they perceive the character. So, in that respect, it's nice, and I'm always interested to get feedback from fans about how they perceive different characters that I'll do differently from either the way that I kind of thought it was going or somebody else thought it was going. And none of them are wrong. They're all correct interpretations, which is nice too. So that's one of the advantages of doing novels. And then that helps me, when I get that feedback, to draw other ideas about, okay, so this kind of worked. Let's go with this or tweak this a little bit going forward. So that's good. And the other fun thing about doing novels, though, is I can be as descriptive as I want with something like a prologue, or I can take a little more time for a story to work itself out, as opposed to like a comic where like it's 25 pages, give or take. So the current book I'm working on, I thought was going to be much shorter than it is, but it's really given me a chance to go back and do a lot more character exploration. Or a good example would be, you've read Chimera. I originally was only going to use the Allison character in there for like the first third of the book, and I just, as I was writing that character, thought this is like a really great character, so I wanted to utilize her more as the book went on, and I was able to do that and play with it a bit more. And you can also do that third-person perspective a lot better in a book than I can do in a comic, where like I'm telling you that this is what this person does, and this is some of her motivations, and this is her background a little bit more. Whereas that might drag on a bit much in a comic book, where, I think I was listening to an interview with Chris the other day about his third Dorgon comic. They thought about doing it as two, but because there had been no action in the first one, he decided they're going to do it as one. You don't run into that problem doing a novel, because you can kind of spread it out a little bit more.
Right. And is it possible that, like, this could be me with my lack of experience with novels, because I've always been more of a movie and comic kind of guy. I noticed that with movies and television, you always have like a set time limit. So like you have like a set amount of time for your story to take place in. Like a movie can be like somewhere between, like, it can be like a short film, but if you're talking like feature length film, it can't be more than at least 2.5 hours. or just like an hour and a half at the most, like in general. And with comics, you got a limited space. So, most comics generally tend to be around like, I don't know, 20, 25 pages.
Right.
Is there a set limit as to how long your story can go on in a novel?
No, not that I've come across. I mean, most of mine I tend to shoot for between 65 and 75 because um, they
Pages, you
tend to
mean,
go.
right?
Sorry?
65 to 75 pages, you mean?
Oh no, I'm sorry. 60 to 75,000 words.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Word count, and I didn't know this until I started writing novels, is kind of more what the editors look for than anything, as opposed to like pages or chapters or anything else. It's word count.
Mm-hmm.
So though I've learned that it depends on the type of book you're writing and that it lends itself better to a specific word count based on your writing style. So for instance, because I try to write at a very high action pace, 65 to 75 seems to be a good amount to get a story in and not have it be over inundated where the action takes over the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
But if you're doing a story where it's and kaiju novelists do this too, you might get, like, for instance, the 2014 Godzilla. It's a movie I like. If you look at that in terms of a novel, it's a very slow build until you get to the great action scenes at the end. So in that case, you might need more space to do it in. And in that instance, editors look for maybe as much as like 125,000 words. But I think the most you can do is like about 150 before it becomes hard to hold it together. And you'd really have to have some kind of cred, like a Stephen King can say, I'm doing 150,000. People are like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem.
He's like, I'm Stephen King. What you gonna do about it?
So if you had that level, you could go a little bit more and then, of course, hold it together a bit longer because, honestly, people will look at a book, and if it's too big, they might be intimidated by it. Whereas like a comic, it's not really going to occur. But if I try to keep a pulp feel to my books, fast-paced and not too long. And I think people like appreciate that when they pick up the paper copy of like, this is something I can read and have fun with, and it's not going to take me 3 months to get through it. And my fans seem to like that and gravitate towards that.
Yeah, I definitely got that vibe a lot, especially by noticing how short your chapters were for Chimera, where it's like it feels like I'm moving through the story at a very brisk pace because I'm knowing, okay, here I am already like 5 chapters in. All right, this is going very well. It's like the pacing. Can you use pacing for books? The word pacing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You can use the term pacing for the book.
All right, the pacing felt very like nice and fast and smooth. So like, I'm just blowing through these chapters away, and it's like it does have that feeling you were just describing.
Which is what I go for, and I feel like as a fan, if I was reading something, that's what I would want, is something that's very fast paced, and I'm just moving through it, and I don't even realize how much I've gone through. Like made me feel good to hear you say, oh, I didn't realize I read first 15 pages of Atomic Rex. I
was reading through it. I was really engaged, and I looked up at my PDFs. I'm like, 11. Whoa, what?
So that's a good affirmation for me of I'm doing a good job of keeping that pace up as I go.
Yeah, definitely. My next question would be, what has been your usual brainstorming and writing process when coming up for new ideas for your stories, and what's the best solution you have personally to writer's block?
I haven't really come across that yet. I would think what happens is because my profession as a teacher lends itself to having to have such a high output of work all the time that it just kind of rolls over into my writing. Like I said, the first year I worked for, this is only my second year working for Severed Press. The first year I worked for them, I got done 4 novels in the course of a year. So I really think, and I will try to tell this to people whenever I do conventions, that just try to write as much as you can. So I'll write 1,000 words each day, minimum is what I shoot for. Sometimes I'll throw out an entire 1,000 words. Sometimes I'll keep it. But I'm not a big fan of like outlining and feeling like I'm stuck to a story. Some more structured, not to say structured, that makes me sound bad. Some people who take a different structured approach to writing than I do feel the need to outline everything. I know my brother does that. He'll have to outline his entire story, whereas I feel like, no, I'm going to start the story, and maybe it's going to go in a different direction than I had originally kind of planned it to do. Like I said in Chimera, I really used the Allison character more than I had the rough plan in my head to do going forward. Or like in when I did Operation Rock, I really built a lot more on the character's psychological development than it was my original plan to do. But it just seemed to kind of flow as the story went on. To me, it sounds cliched. I look at my writing more as of a journey than a destination, and I think people, a lot of people will come to me on Facebook or whatever and say, like, hey, Matt, I want to do the story, but I really can't get it off the ground because I don't know what's going to happen when I do this, or I don't know what's going to happen when I do that. And I try to tell them, just keep writing. You know, if you go back and you decide that you don't like where something's going, you can take it out. But if you're writing, instead of just trying to plan in your head exactly how each chapter is going to go, you kind of get bogged down. But if you're rolling with something, maybe you'll come across a piece where you feel you can build off it more than you originally had. Maybe it's more of a fluid process than a rigid process.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, I've sort of done the same myself, where it's like I've had this idea for like in my idea for my story for Draco Azul, I have this idea planned for like if it was a television series, I planned out like 2 seasons worth of television episodes. But then like as I started writing my one experimental teaser / first issue of Draco Azul, I started like redoing a lot of things and like restructuring certain character types, character arcs. And yeah, I had this one character who's more of like a crazy, hot-blooded, young personality, and then I kind of slowly changed him into more of like the stern mentor type of stern, older, more down to earth, harsh type of character. So yeah, you have ideas, and ideas change all the time, and if they don't gel with what you had originally, then it's okay to go back and start restructuring things, I think.
Yeah, that's and that's the best way to approach that. And I think that's what people get stuck with on writer's block is they had a certain idea and it's just not working out.
Yeah. But I guess there's a part of them that really doesn't want to let go of that idea.
Right. And it might come again from being a teacher, and that I might go in thinking, I'm going to teach this lesson in a certain format, and then clearly it's just not working. So I have to be able to then switch it up and be like, all right, I'm going to approach it differently now, and just accept the fact that, okay, that one didn't work, but it's cool. We'll just move on and do something else, as opposed to continue trying to fit that square peg into a proverbial round hole, which I think some writers try to do.
Yeah. Okay. And so, moving past the writing process, what do you think in terms of through your experiences, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to publishing your work or finding a publisher in general? Because I know, like, in your case, you had a publisher come to you, but what would you have to say in terms of the whole publishing business, or your thoughts on the publishing business?
Well, Lisa, I've been very lucky in that I kind of stumbled into working with Severed Press, and they've been tremendous to work with. But I have heard some not good stories from other people in the genre. I've self-published a few books, and that is very difficult and time-consuming, and I would not recommend it to people. Just for funky things like, especially the print versions of books, to self-publish a digital copy is actually fairly easy. Print versions is very difficult to get the spacing to fit precisely on a page and stuff like that. The hardest part, I'm working, somebody else I'm working with, I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work or not, is Zach Cole, who did Kaiju Epic, is a very good story, and we're going to be working on a few projects in the future together. But he does a lot of self-publishing, and he's had a lot of difficulty latching onto a publisher, and he's a very good author, so I'm surprised by it. But it seems to me that one of the things that makes the biggest problem for people when they try to go to a publisher is their initial presentation, not so much of the book, but of themselves that comes across. So, for instance, a lot of times when I did first go to Severed Press, is that I had to write a description of myself and my approach to writing. It was almost very much like an interview for a job.
Okay.
And how you think about writing and your approach and examples of influences like you had asked, well, who are my influences? And, it's like why Edgar Rice Burroughs is a big influence type of thing. But I think that's one of the things that hits people. Again, I feel like I'm probably lucky coming from a profession where I have to do kind of a lot of written presentations and stuff, so it came off well. But I could definitely see if you might be a very good writer, but don't have that background necessarily, when you make that first kind of approach to a publishing company, that they might be a little more hesitant to take a look at your work, unfortunately. Just based kind of on this brief sample, which is more of a realistic picture of you than it is your ability to tell a story in a fictional setting. If you're doing like kaiju or suspense or mystery, whatever the case might be.
I see. And so I guess this leads me to my next, thank you. I do want to say thank you very much for the very valuable information, because I know there are a lot of people out there who do want to get into they do want to get their, foot in the door, and probably, they need as much information as they can when preparing themselves to get into this business.
You're welcome. And real quick, just for anybody who's out there listening and wants to be a writer, I often make this analogy. I'm a big sports guy too. You really have to go back, especially in prose writing. It's not so much the case in comic book writing, but work on things like grammar, punctuation, spacing. I can't tell you how many people send me stories and they don't indent the first paragraph. It drives me crazy. But
as someone who's done a lot of writing for high school and university, it's like that the indentation is like burned into my mind.
Yeah, but publishers absolutely look at those types of things. And it's not the fun part about being a writer doing those, but if you want to be successful, it makes a difference. And to the reader, it makes a difference too. Like if I read a story that's poorly edited or poorly constructed, I'm more distracted by that than I am the story. So I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go to the next question.
No, that's all right. That does remind me. Do you yourself have a personal editor for these books, or do you do it yourself?
Well, I do it myself. Luckily, my brother's an English teacher, so if he has the opportunity, I'll send it to him. Okay. And I do have a few other teachers. It's my job that I'll send it to, but Severed Press does edit it as well when I send it to them.
Okay.
Even with that, stuff is still missed. Like, people will say to me, like, hey, your book could have used a little bit more editing in this spot. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I do my best, and I send it to the publishing company, they do it, but stuff like I assume
stuff just slips through the cracks.
Yeah.
It's definitely I assume it's like a learning process. It's just one of those things you just have to learn from this and then improve over time for the next time.
In fact, I think you've read Chimera, which probably because my first one has the most kind of slips and stuff, and I just assumed when I sent it to Severed Press they caught everything. But I've learned since that's not the case. So I try to look more diligently at it, and I've tried to look for things that I notice myself that is an issue. So for instance, like a lot of times it'd be words that look the same. So when I proofread it, it makes sense. For instance, like served and severed. Like if you're reading really quickly, you might just kind of skip over it. So I've really made a point of any word I know that kind of looks like another word to double check it as I'm going through.
Yeah. All right. Cool. And my next question is, what have been some of the biggest or most memorable moments from your career as a published author?
Oh, great question. Without a doubt, one of the first coolest things is to hold your first printed book in your hand is super cool. Anybody who writes to me and says they're struggling and they're not sure they're going to get there, I keep telling them, like, hang in there. Like, to be able to hold your finished work in your hand and know that other people are out there reading it is a tremendous feeling. Seconded then by getting feedback from fans. In that, like, when I first started getting people contacting me through Facebook, like, oh, I really love the Atomic Rex, and, like I couldn't put it down. That is truly a great feeling because, it's nice that a company likes your work, but it's like, are the fans going to like what I'm doing and going forward? And then the third step, and I think this was really neat because I saw it happen to a few other people in the Artist Alley at G-Fest, is when the fans can kind of meet you face to face. And you get that feeling. I remember this year's G-Fest, I felt kind of bad at the time, but a kid had come in, and I had sold out of Atomic Rex, of course, and he was there specifically for an Atomic Rex book. And his mom was with him, and he was like, "Well, can I get a picture with you?" And I was like, "Sure."
Aw. Yeah, yeah.
So, that was really cool. I felt kind of bad for the kid that didn't have any more books to sell to him. But the fact that he just wanted a picture with me for something I'd done it
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
very cool feeling.
Hmm. Yeah, that must feel like, and that must felt like, that must have like really, um, hit you hard, like in all the right
Yeah,
ways.
yeah. Well, I could picture myself as a kid, meeting. Uh, I, I don't put myself on par with like a Stanley or somebody, but
Mm.
somebody who I was a big fan of as a kid, being able to meet them was kind of very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. I
That
know, like the first time I ever had that kind of feeling myself was I was really. Are you familiar with it's a website that's no longer up, but it was like a review, a movie a film critic movie review podcasting website called Spill.com.
Oh yes, yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah, it was like a bunch of guys and they would animate themselves and put themselves
yes,
on YouTube. Yeah, yeah. Those were like the guys that were like my biggest inspiration for becoming a podcaster, for becoming YouTuber, for reviewing movies, and for eventually my inspirations for being a film critic, a film journalist. And I got the chance to meet them all at 2014 Comic-Con. I saw them
oh,
at their
okay.
booth, and it was like an amazing feeling, like interacting with them and talking to them and getting my picture with them. It's like I knew like that feeling like very well, being able to meet these people that you respected and admire for a long time.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it is. It is cool.
Hmm. So that did tie into my other question, which I guess you've answered for the most part, was what are some of your most memorable interactions with fans of your work?
Oh, yeah, it was definitely there at G Fest was fantastic. Um, what's also neat is I'll get a lot of people who will check out my website, and they'll tie it back into my profession as a teacher of students with autism, and that I'll get positive feedback on. I'm somebody with high functioning autism, and I think it's so cool that you're writing. And they'll reference Chimera a lot because it ties into there with the ABA practices about like that you get. I clearly know what I'm talking about with that, and they feel like I put a positive spin on approaching people with that specific syndrome.
Hmm.
So that makes me feel really good because I was a little hesitant about that. In fact, to make another parallel, I'm a big Stan Lee fan. And I read when he first published Daredevil, he was actually very concerned that people in the blind community would have backlash against him. Like, you can't do this, make a superhero who's blind. When in fact, quite a few people who were blind apparently reached out and said, "This is so great! You made a blind superhero. It's
Hmm.
we can still do things with our lives that people don't necessarily think about." And I kind of got similar type feedback
Hmm.
from high-functioning people with autism after they had read Chimera, and that the main character there was a teacher of students with autism. So that was a very high point for me as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that. See why.
Yeah.
Um, and my next question is, I would like you to tell us about your experiences with both G-Fest and G-Fan magazine and how you came to be associated with JD Lee's and the gang.
Well, like I said, I had first written a story for Black Coat that they just didn't have a spot for and they liked. And I thought, I'll just send this to G-Fan. And JD liked it, got back to me, and kind of indicated that as we talked about the Kaiju Tales section of Falling Apart, and hey, would I like to be one of the people that kind of picked up on that? So I
Hmm.
was like, oh yeah, sure. And for anybody who's never met JD, he is one of the nicest people you ever meet,
Hmm.
truly and honestly. And he has a love for giant monsters, and he wants to help people out who have an aspirations to do stuff in that genre as much as he possibly can.
Hmm.
Um, but he does have kind of a very don't get frustrated if he doesn't get back to you right away. He takes a
Hmm.
while to
Yeah,
do that.
yeah.
So um, there was that, and the next step, like I said, was meeting some of the other authors that I had connected with doing the G Fantas Versus series. Was just tremendous. Like um, Todd Tennant and Mike Bogue, who do King Komodo, they had a run in G-Fan, and I got to work with them. It was very cool in the G-Fantas Versus series. Or we talked a little bit about Keith Foster with his Kadoja. It was really fun to work with, and he's a super cool guy.
Hmm.
Chris, of course. Um, worked with Tyler and Scott with their Durantis
Mm-hmm.
character for the G-Fantasy First series. Is very fun. And then last year I got asked by JD to come out for G-Fest for the 2015 G-Fest.
Mm-hmm.
So it always been a dream of mine to make it to G-Fest, and he asked me to come out there and speak at the writers panel. So I thought, oh, this is great. I'll be actually to speak at G-Fest and not just be there kind of hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
And that went very well, and I got to meet like Skip Peel and Neil Reeby, who were really the people who started off the Kaiju Tales section of G-Fan. So that was a little bit of a dream come true for me.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm friends with both of those gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
And then it came apart like, well, JD didn't realize I was writing books as well. And he said, why don't you do the Artist Alley next year? So that was really fun for me in this year to do the Artist Alley at G-Fest, and then also to put faces with the names of a lot of those people, like I had said, Chris Martinez,
Yeah.
Keith Foster, and I got to meet you and give you an award, part of, a group of other people. So that was fun. And that was really a blast. And I got to do the 2 panels last year, which I always love doing the panels at G-Fest, because the people there, they come because they want to be there, which it sounds cliche, but I'm a teacher, so kids don't always want to be in my classroom. But
when kids are interested and not interested.
Yeah.
Like being a teacher and a father yourself.
Oh yeah, but believe me, that's a whole other story. But to see people who are so invested in what I have to say and they like my work, and I just want to help them out, because I wouldn't be where I am today as a writer if so many people didn't take the time to help me out. So I try to take that kind of pay it forward approach. So that's really cool. And it's always a blast there.
In a way, like kind of giving back to the community that helped you out in the first place.
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, if it weren't for like a Jeremy Robinson first saying, hey, let's do this project, and then I could attach his name to kind of those resumes I was talking about.
Yeah.
Publishers, it's a big help, So if I can do the same thing for other aspiring writers, I want to be able to do that. And to help grow the genre as much as possible. Because as much as I like being a writer, I'm a fan as well. So if we can get more people out there writing kaiju stories, I think it's a good thing.
Okay, and I think that perfectly fits into my probably a second to last question, and that is, as a fan of giant monsters, what have you taken away from this whole experience? And is there any advice left that you would like to give to people interested in being a writer like yourself, or getting into any sort of writing, be it comic, novel, or film, television, what have you?
Yeah, the first best thing I can say is whatever you're trying for, don't be afraid of failure. I can't tell you how many people I'll talk to and they'll be like, well, I just don't think I'm good enough. And I always say, like, yeah, but give it a shot. The worst you can do is it doesn't go anywhere, and at least you'll know that you tried. And who knows how things might progress. I never thought I'd be where I'm at, and, here I am. And hopefully taking other steps going forward. So the second part would be to, and we kind of talked about this a little bit too, recognize the dichotomy of the kaiju genre. Like, you don't want to be the person who takes it too seriously and is always trying to, be crazy about it.
Like an elitist of some kind?
Yeah, which, like, some people do kind of take that approach. Like, every kaiju story needs to be dark, and it needs to be scary, and it needs to be vicious. No, you can do fun ones too. And keep in mind, I can't reiterate this enough, it's really important to do stories that kids will like too. Because if we don't do that, then the genre is just going to die out. It's kind of a problem with comic books, where a lot of comics have become very adult-oriented. And there's not a whole lot of kid-friendly comics to bring that next generation sort of into the flow. So, definitely keep that in mind too as you're writing going forward. And my last bit of advice would be, if you love the genre, just go for it and do what you can. Like, the thing about kaiju that is great is that it does have so many different facets to it. It's funny, but it's also can be scary, and it's also can be campy, but it can also be very serious, and it can have a very hard-hitting message to it, a very serious real-world message, or it can just be, I'm just doing this for fun. So it's one of the nice things that it allows you to change a lot in the kaiju genre. It's not like you're doing mystery, where you've always kind of got to keep that kind of noir feel to it all the way through. It does give you a lot to play with. Like, in fact, I loved doing I keep coming back to him, but Chris Martinez's Dorgon, I did his story because we did that just kind of totally like a joke story, and it was really fun to switch up gears for that.
Yeah. Very excellent. So, what sort of projects can we look forward from you over in the horizon?
Just to hit on them again, I'm almost done my Kaiju core novel, so hopefully that'll be out early 2017. In GFan, you will soon see the GFantis versus Dorgon's prose story I did. The story I did with Keith Foster using Atomic Rex and Kendoja with GFantis. The Dorgon Atomic Rex comic that Chris and I are doing for there. Then for me also, you can look forward to Atomic Rex and Chimera comic book that Chris and I are working on, as well as the Atomic Rex Arrakis comic book I'm working on with Frank and Wayne. I've also, I'll just plug this very quickly. I do have a kid's book out because we talked about Frankenstein called Frankenstein Monster Goes to Oz, which deals with the Frankenstein monster being in Oz. We're doing a sequel to that, myself and my friend Josh Torito. And we're going to do a Christmas-based one that probably won't release until next Christmas because, it just would work well there.
Yeah.
But that's, again, me trying to reach out to the next generation of writers with monsters and do a friendly piece there. So a lot going on with that. I'm also publishing a Kaiju anthology for the first time. So I have, I'm contributing to that as well as Tim Price, who did Big in Japan. Also, by the way, if you'd like, I'd love to put you in touch with Tim, the most enthusiastic Kaiju author you'll ever talk to.
Oh, so nice. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Especially if he has something to promote in the future, then yeah, there's definitely a chance for that.
Oh yeah, he does. He's got his Big in Japan book 1 and 2, and I believe he's working on his third one right now. He'd be really cool. But anyway, he's contributing to my anthology as well as Neil Reeby, who, as I mentioned, was one of the first people to really do the Kaiju tales for GFan, and then a bunch of brand new first ever published story people. So that to me is very exciting as well. So I've been working with all of them, and we have an artist who's going to be doing artwork for it. If anybody else is interested who's listening to this podcast, just check me out on Facebook. If you have a good idea, we'll see if we can't get in there for you and kind of give you your first step into hopefully what's a bigger and better world in terms of writing for you as well.
Excellent.
So a lot going on in 2017.
It sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
And so I do want to say thank you very much, Matt, for being on the show today. Thank you so much for all the information. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to talk to you, kind of like for the first time face-to-face since G-Fest. And I hope you, the audience, have enjoyed this entire episode as well. So to wrap things up, where can people find you, Matt?
I'm on Facebook. Just look up Matthew Dennion on Facebook. I'll come up. You can also look me up at www.matthew.dennion.com is my website. And you can contact me through that as well. You can also find all of my books on Amazon and severedpress.com. And there's contact information for me on both of those sites as well.
Excellent. I'll be sure to put all of those links in the description of this video below.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That has been it for the latest episode of the Shuwatch podcast. So as usual, I have been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
And I'm Matthew Dennion. Thank you so much again, everybody, for listening to me.
And until next time, everybody, take care.